Hi everyone. I'm Bubbles from Susan's family. Today I will show you the Shian long sweater work method. This sweater comes in different sizes. The crochet techniques are similar. The whole sweater is divided into the back body, the right front and left front, and the sleeves, the front band, the collar, buttons, and tassels. Note that this sweater is crocheted using 2 strands of yarn together. You can take yarn from both the center and outer ring of the yarn ball simultaneously, combining them as one strand for crocheting. When you have enough yarn balls, you can also take one strand from each of 2 yarn balls. Pay attention not to take the wrong yarn, because every iron's crochet tension varies, resulting in different sizes of knitted pieces. Before starting the main project, you need to make a gauge sample first. Measure your crochet tension. The method for making the gauge sample is explained in a separate video tutorial. Refer to the pattern chart for specific instructions. After measuring, follow the video guidance. Adjust and then continue crocheting. Start with the back piece first. Divide into the hem, body, and chest panel. For the hem, use the alternate knit and purl stitches method to cast on. Work back and forth. This creates a single rib texture like this. Now let's take a look at the chart. Here I'll use an arbitrary size chart as an example. The final chart should match your actual project. Each square on the chart represents 1 stitch, corresponding to 1 loop when crocheting. Different colored squares in the front and back bodies sections correspond to different color yarns. Blank squares indicate knit stitches. A horizontal line indicates purl stitches. Blank areas have no stitches, meaning no crocheting is needed. When counting the number of stitches per row here, just count the number of squares, then match it with the number of loops on your needle. Short rows are counted separately for row numbers. Arrows indicate the crocheting direction. The right side is always read from right to left on the chart. The wrong side is read from left to right on the chart. Pay attention when working on the wrong side. You need to work the opposite stitch technique shown on the chart. This is the basic introduction to the chart. First, let's cast on. Use the knit and purl cast on method. Pay attention to using the corresponding hook size for casting on. Then work back and forth in single rib. Everyone learn the technique first, then follow the pattern to complete it. Check the demonstration for specific stitch instructions. First, take the corresponding yarn. Make a slip knot with the yarn. Unless there are special circumstances, start by leaving about 10 centimeters. This makes it easier to weave in ends later. Pick up a straight needle with your left hand, or one end of the circular needle. Insert into the loop. Gently tighten. This is the first stitch. Hold another needle with your right hand in a pencil grip, or the other end of the circular needle. Wrap the yarn around your right pinky finger once. Gently pinch the yarn with your ring and middle fingers. Place this yarn between your index and middle fingers. This is the basic posture for knitting. If you're alternating knit and purl stitches for the cast on, after completing the first stitch, there are 2 scenarios. One is that the first stitch counts as a purl stitch. The other is that the first stitch counts as a knit stitch. These depend on the specific situation. Usually, we consider the first stitch as a purl stitch. Start the second stitch as a knit stitch. Place the right needle above the yarn. Insert the right needle downward into the loop on the left needle. Use your right index finger to hold the yarn. Yarn over and pull the yarn through. Place it onto the left needle. Don't pull the yarn too tight. Otherwise, it will be difficult to pick up stitches later. The second knit stitch is now cast on. You can see the yarn is underneath. Next, start the purl stitch cast on. Place the right needle below the yarn. Pass through upward between these two loops. Note, this position is between the loops. Do not pass through the loops. Then yarn over. Pull through. Place it onto the left needle. This is the third stitch. This stitch is for the purl. You can see the yarn is above. Continue casting on for the knit stitch. Place the right needle above the yarn. Insert into the space between the loops. Yarn over and draw through. This is the fourth stitch. Cast on one more purl stitch. Place the right needle below the yarn. Insert into the space between the loops. Yarn over and draw through. This is the fifth stitch. Continue alternating between knit and purl stitches. When the yarn is above, cast on a knit stitch. When the yarn is below, cast on a purl stitch. Continue until you reach the required number of stitches. In another scenario, count the first stitch as a knit stitch. The second stitch as a purl stitch. Then alternate between knit and purl stitches. This is the method for alternating knit and purl stitches when casting on. If the pattern doesn't specify whether the first stitch counts as a purl or knit stitch, you can determine it by referring to the chart. Read the chart from left to right. For example, here the first stitch on the left side is a knit stitch, so the first cast on stitch counts as a knit stitch. The second stitch is a purl stitch, so the second cast on stitch should be a purl stitch. Then alternate between knit and purl stitches. Another example, in this chart, the first stitch on the left side is a knit stitch, so our first cast on stitch counts as a knit stitch. The second stitch is still a knit stitch. So cast on one knit stitch. The third stitch is a purl stitch, so cast on one purl stitch. Then alternate between knit and purl stitches. We can also check the texture after casting on. The stitches toward the back indicate that you just cast on a purl stitch. The stitches toward the front indicate that you just cast on a knit stitch. I have fewer stitches here, mainly to explain the method. According to the chart above, you can see that, after casting on is complete, start knitting the single rib pattern. The single rib overall has a texture of alternating one knit stitch and one purl stitch. Work row 1. Row 1 is worked on the right side. Read the chart from right to left. Work all stitches identical to the chart. Note, different products may have different stitch counts at the beginning and ending of the piece. Just follow the chart when working your actual piece. If the beginning and ending differ from the swatch, you can first watch my demonstration of knit and purl stitches, then follow the chart. The first stitch in the swatch chart is a vertical symbol, which indicates a knit stitch. When working, hold a straight needle in your right hand, or the other end of a circular needle. Wrap the yarn around your right pinky once. Gently pinch the yarn between your ring finger and middle finger. Place the yarn between the middle finger and index finger. Before working a knit stitch, place the yarn under the right needle, which is behind. Then move the right needle from left to right, insert into the first loop. Note it's not between two loops. Yarn over and draw through. While releasing the loop on the left needle. One knit stitch is done. The second stitch is a horizontal symbol, indicating a purl stitch. Note, when alternating between knit and purl stitches, bring the yarn to the corresponding position before knitting. Therefore, before purling, first bring the yarn to the front, then purl the stitch. Move the right needle from right to left. Insert into the loop. Yarn over and draw through. Release the loop from the left needle at the same time. One purl stitch is done. The third stitch is a knit stitch. Before knitting, always bring the yarn to the back. Then insert from left to right into the loop. Yarn over. Draw through. Another knit stitch is complete. You can see, after finishing the knit stitch, the side facing you will form a braid-like texture below. On the other side, it shows a horizontal line here. The fourth stitch is a purl stitch. Bring the yarn to the front of the needle. Insert from right to left into the loop. Yarn over and draw through. Another purl stitch is done. You can see, after finishing the purl stitch, the side facing you, the horizontal line is below the loop. From the back side, the braid is below the loop. Continue alternating one knit stitch and one purl stitch. Note, always bring the yarn to the corresponding position before stitching. That is, before knitting a knit stitch, first bring the yarn to the back. Before knitting a purl stitch, first bring the yarn to the front. If you can read the texture, you can also follow the texture. The front loop is a knit stitch. The back loop is a purl stitch. When you see a knit stitch, knit it. When you see a purl stitch, purl it. Repeat this process. Continue knitting this row. Edge stitch according to the pattern chart. Now, the first row of the swatch is finished. If you're not sure how to count rows, after finishing the first row, place a marker on any chain on the right side. Make one mark. Convenient for counting rows. If you don't have stitch markers, you can use safety pins or paper clips instead, which also serves as a mark on the right side. Next, work row 2. Row 2 is worked on the wrong side. Read the chart from left to right. You need to work the opposite stitch technique shown in the chart, meaning knit stitch symbol becomes purl stitch symbol becomes knit stitch. The swatch chart starts with one knit stitch symbol. I work one purl stitch. Note: when working purl stitch, bring the yarn to the front before knitting. Next is one purl stitch symbol. Work one knit stitch. You can also follow the texture. See horizontal lines below, which means purl texture. So work purl stitch. See braids below, which means knit texture. So work knit stitch. Horizontal lines work purl stitch. Braids work knit stitch. Continue following the texture. Finish the second row. The edge stitch texture might not be obvious. Just follow the chart. So, the second row is done. Next, work row 3. You can also follow the texture below. If the edge stitch texture is unclear, refer to the chart, then work all stitches identical to the texture below. Horizontal lines, work purl stitch. Braids, work knit stitch. Continue to finish this row. For the last stitch, you can also refer to the chart. For each subsequent row, regardless of right or wrong side, you can follow the texture below. When you see horizontal lines below, work purl stitch. When you see braids below, work knit stitch. This is the method for single ribbing. The swatch here has several rows of single ribbing completed. We can count the rows on the right side. The stitch marker indicates the yarn loop formed by casting on. One braid equals one row. Here we have 5 braids, plus the loop on the hook, which also counts as one row. Therefore, we've completed 6 rows in total here. This is how to count rows for single ribbing. With that, the hem knitting explanation is complete. Next, we'll learn about the body. Continue with stocking stitch from the hem. meaning all knit stitches on the right side row, all purl stitches on the wrong side row, while working the color pattern. Different colored squares on the chart represent using different colored yarns. Now, let's show. Let's start with row 1. We'll consider this side as the right side, when the yarn tail for starting chain is on the left-hand side. As the right side, we'll need 2 colors. The color of the first stitch in row 1, which is the starting chain yarn, is called color 1. First, knit the corresponding number of stitches with color 1. After finishing, switch colors. Take the corresponding color yarn, called color 2. Make a knot on color 1. Pull it to the base. Then knit 1 stitch with color 2. Stretch the piece. Then continue knitting with color 1. Pay attention here. Since the next stitch with color 2 is far away, so for the next 4 or 5 stitches with color 1, carry color 2 along. Place the yarn tail of color 2 above color 1 before knitting. After a few stitches, stretch the piece. Keep the piece flat. When more than 5 stitches later, carry the yarn as per this method. Continue to finish this row. Note that my swatch has fewer stitches, and should not be used as reference. Pay attention, when knitting the edge knit stitches, also carry color 2. After finishing, row 1 is completed. Now let's knit row 2. This row is worked on the wrong side. You need to knit the opposite stitch pattern as shown in the chart. Start with color 1. When knitting, also carry color 2. Similarly, place the yarn tail of color 2 above color 1 before knitting. Later, when working on the wrong side, carry the yarn. Repeat this process. Finish this row. Pay attention. Here when knitting the edge, also carry color too. After finishing, row 2 is completed. Now everyone continue following this method. Refer to the chart to change colors. Knit all the way to row 8. After finishing, proceed to knit row 9. First take a look at the finished product. Here you need to use yarn in 3 colors. Continue the previous sequence, meaning color 3 is needed here. Color 3 will be used for the first few rows, spaced quite far apart, and each row has only 1 stitch. Here we can wind 2 small balls of yarn. Convenient for crocheting. Next I'll teach you a method to wind small balls of yarn. Let me show you how to wind small balls of yarn. To wind small balls of yarn, there are 2 situations. One is taking yarn from an independent skein to wind. The other is when the yarn is still connected to the fabric piece. Regardless of which, the winding method is the same. First leave about 10 centimeters of yarn tail, or slightly longer. This yarn tail will be pulled out later. Place it like this at the left hand thumb crotch position. Pinch with thumb. Then wind figure 8 around the hand like this. If winding small ball while yarn is still connected to the fabric piece, wind it like this. Note that this end is connected to the fabric piece. Convenient for pulling out the yarn. Wind with moderate tension. The more stitches in a color block, the more yarn to wind. The fewer stitches in a color block, the less yarn to wind. If the yarn runs out later, just join new yarn and continue crocheting. Wind roughly to the required size. Leave a tail and cut off. Then tie a knot like this. First wrap several rounds to secure in the middle. If the yarn is smooth, tie a few more knots. If the yarn tail is too long here, trim it slightly shorter. This is the method for winding a small yarn ball. When using it, just gently pull the yarn like this. The benefit of winding a small yarn ball is that during crocheting, the yarn is relatively secured, so the ball won't slip off. And when there are multiple balls, they won't tangle with each other, making crocheting more convenient. If the small yarn ball is nearing the ending and becomes loose, you can unwind it. Rewind it. or if you make a mistake during crocheting and have to unravel many stitches. You can wind that unraveled section into another small yarn ball. This end is still connected to the fabric piece. After winding, secure this part well with yarn. That's all you need to do. Next, you can prepare small yarn balls as needed for the beginning of crocheting. Then start crocheting. First finish the first few stitches before color 3. After finishing, take the corresponding color yarn for color 3. Here join the yarn using the yarn ball. The joining method is the same as before. Then continue crocheting to the next color 3 position. During the crocheting process, continue carrying the yarn tail of color 2. You don't need to carry the yarn tail of color 3. When you reach the corresponding position, use a small yarn ball to join the yarn here. Then continue crocheting. Finish this row. Note: you'll need to join yarn with a small yarn ball later. Same method. After finishing, row 9 is completed. Now refer to the chart and continue crocheting until row 16 is done. Note: when you reach the last few stitches of row 16, bring the yarn tail of color 3 to the position near color 3 in the next row. After finishing, cut off the yarn tails of the small yarn ball and color 2. Then hide them on the wrong side following the texture. Hide the remaining yarn tails using the same method. Next, crochet row 17. Start with color 1. After finishing, crochet color 3. Continue crocheting with color 1. Remember to carry the yarn tail of color 3 while crocheting. Complete this row. Once finished, row 17 is done. Next, refer to the chart. Continue until the body is completed. The method for joining yarn and carrying yarn tails remains the same as before. That concludes the body section. Now let's crochet the chest piece. Continue crocheting from the body. For the first few rows here, decrease stitches at the edges to form the armhole. After completing the corresponding row numbers, continue working even. Once finished, crochet the shoulder parts. When crocheting the shoulder parts, work short rows on both sides. Bind off in the middle to form the neck opening. Fasten off after everything is completed. Here's the method for decreasing underarm stitches. Left and right short row techniques, as well as the neckline decrease method. Note that the neckline decrease method. The video demonstrates using the front piece as an example. The method is identical. The right shoulder part position is reversed. Learn the technique before crocheting. I'll demonstrate using this small swatch. At the beginning of row 1, bind off several stitches consecutively. Refer to the chart for specific stitch count. There are several bind off symbols, indicating how many stitches to bind off. I need to bind off 4 stitches consecutively here. If binding off many stitches consecutively, we can first separate them with stitch markers. Begin binding off. The first stitch can be a slip stitch, or a knit stitch. I'll do a slip stitch here. Then knit 1 stitch. Then pull the first stitch over the next one. That's how you bind off 1 stitch. Unless specified otherwise, on the right side always bind off with knit stitches. Continue with 1 knit stitch. Bind off 1 stitch. Continue binding off while knitting. Keep going until only 1 loop remains to the right of the stitch marker. I have 2 loops left here. Need to bind off 1 more stitch. Now only 1 loop remains to the right of the stitch marker, which is the loop of the 4th stitch. We need to bind off this stitch as well. So, knit 1 more stitch and bind off. This next stitch is the final bind off marker. The adjacent stitch. Here we simply knit a knit stitch. Note: since the stitch techniques may vary for different patterns, this stitch needs to be worked following the chart. After finishing it, bind off the 4th stitch as well. This way, the 4 stitches on the chart have been bound off. Continue working according to the chart. Note, the next stitch should start from the second stitch next to the bind-off marker. Begin knitting. Before crocheting, gently tighten this loop to prevent noticeable holes. There are no special patterns here. We'll knit all stitches as knit stitches. Finish this row. Now we've completed row 1. Continue to work row 2. We will work this row on the wrong side. Start by binding off 4 stitches in a row. First, place a stitch marker to separate. Begin binding off. For the first stitch, you can work a slip stitch or purl stitch. Here, I'll work a slip stitch. Then work 1 purl stitch. Next, pass the previous stitch over the following stitch. This binds off 1 stitch. Continue with 1 purl stitch. Bind off 1 stitch. Unless otherwise specified, on the wrong side, work purl stitches while binding off. Continue working purl stitches while binding off. Keep going until only 1 stitch remains to the right of the stitch marker. Here we'll bind off 1 more stitch. Now only 1 stitch remains to the right of the stitch marker, which is the loop of the 4th stitch. Bind off this stitch as well. So work 1 more stitch and bind off the next stitch, which is also the stitch adjacent to the last bind off symbol. On the wrong side, we work this stitch as a purl stitch. Bind off the 4th stitch. When actually knitting the specific stitch technique for this stitch, refer to the pattern. This way the 4 stitches shown in the chart are bound off. Continue following the chart. Note, the next step should start from the second stitch next to this bind off symbol. Begin knitting from the second stitch next to this bind off symbol. Before knitting, gently tighten this loop to prevent noticeable holes. There are no special patterns here. We purl all stitches. Now the second row is complete. Next, bind off on the right side. The method is the same as row 1. Bind off on the wrong side. The method is the same as row 2. I'll demonstrate 2 more rows. Continue to work row 3. This row starts with casting off 2 stitches. First cast off 1 stitch. On the right side, knit stitch bind off. Then knit 1 stitch and bind off. Note: when binding off the last stitch, the stitch to be worked should follow the pattern chart. Sometimes the motif is special. It may not be a knit stitch here. Don't make mistakes. Same for the wrong side. Now I've bound off 2 stitches. Continue working this row. Once completed, continue working row 4. This row starts with binding off 2 stitches. Bind off 1 stitch first. Purl stitch on the wrong side for bind off. Then work 1 purl stitch and bind off. This way 2 stitches are bound off. Continue working this row to the end. Now I've completed row 4. If only 1 stitch needs to be bound off on both sides, use the same method as binding off the first stitch mentioned earlier. This is the underarm bind off method. Short rows with stitches left on the left side. As you can see, here we need to work 6 short rows. Row 1 is worked on the right side. Leave 5 stitches unworked at the end. I've already worked it. Row 2 is worked on the wrong side. First make a wrap stitch on the right needle like this. Don't make the wrap stitch too loose. Then work 1 slip stitch. Next, work purl stitches evenly into each stitch. Finish this row. Once completed, continue to row 3. At the end of this row except for the first 5 stitches. Leave 4 more stitches unworked. Note: this wrap stitch doesn't count. Once completed, continue to row 4. Work in the same way as row 2. First make 1 wrap stitch like this. Then work 1 slip stitch. Next follow the chart to finish this row. For the following row 5, leave 4 more stitches unworked at the end. Same as before, the wrap stitch doesn't count. Work row 6 in the same way as row 2. I'll continue to finish these 2 rows. Now, I've completed the short rows. Finally need to work one more row to eliminate row difference, short for row elimination. Knit one by one accordingly. Knit until one stitch before the wrap stitches. Once completed, knit the wrap stitch together with the left side stitch as one knit stitch. Every time you reach the wrap stitch position later, you need to knit the wrap stitch together with the left side stitch. Continue to finish this row. Now, row elimination is done. Take a look. This is the right side effect. This is the wrong side effect. Sometimes to make both sides have identical row counts, you need to knit one more row. Just follow the pattern chart for details. Short rows with wraps on the right side. As you can see, here we need to do 6 short rows. Row 1 is worked on the wrong side. Leave 5 stitches unworked at the end. I've already knitted it. Row 2 is worked on the right side. First make a wrap stitch on the right needle like this. Then knit 1 slip stitch. Next, knit one by one accordingly. Finish this row. Once done, continue to work row 3. At the end of this row except for the first 5 stitches, leave 4 more stitches unworked. Note: this wrap stitch is not included. Once completed, continue to work row 4. The method is identical to row 2. First make 1 wrap stitch like this. Then knit 1 slip stitch. Next follow the chart to finish this row. For the following row 5, leave 4 more stitches at the ending. Same, the wrap stitch is not counted. Row 6 is also identical to row 2. I'll continue to work these 2 rows. Now, I've completed the short rows. Finally need to work one more row. To eliminate row difference, short for row elimination. First work purl stitches into each stitch in sequence. Keep knitting until one stitch before the wrap stitch. Once completed, swap the wrap stitch with the stitch on the left first. Then work them together as one purl stitch. Every time you reach the wrap stitch position later, first swap the wrap stitch with the stitch on the left. Then work them together as a purl stitch. Continue to finish this row. Now, row elimination is done. Take a look. This is the right side effect. Let's learn a common neckline decrease technique, which is decreasing by working knit stitches to create the desired curve. Assuming this is the front body neckline. So, this side is the left shoulder. This side is the right shoulder. Sometimes, the shoulders require short rows. But here there are no short rows. Let's focus on the neckline decrease only. We'll start with the left shoulder first. This pattern has fewer stitches, mainly demonstrating the method. First, work row 1 of the neckline, which means knitting 13 knit stitches first. If there are more stitches, you can use stitch markers to separate these stitches before working them. I've already completed row 1. Leave the remaining loops on hold. Next, work row 2. Row 2 is worked on the wrong side. As you can see, this row starts with decreasing 3 stitches in a row. If there are many consecutive decreases, we can separate them with stitch markers first. Start decreasing. You can knit 1 slip stitch first, then 1 purl stitch. Then pull the first stitch over the next stitch. This decreases 1 stitch. Continue with 1 purl stitch. Decrease another stitch. Unless specified otherwise, on the wrong side, decrease while purling. There's one stitch left to the right of the marker, which is the loop of the third stitch. We need to decrease this stitch. Therefore, we need to work one more stitch and decrease. The very next stitch. Is the stitch adjacent to the last decrease symbol? Here we simply purl this stitch. Note, since stitch techniques may vary across different patterns, refer to the chart for this stitch. After finishing, decrease the third stitch. That's it. The 3 stitches shown on the chart have been decreased. Continue following the chart. Note, the next stitch should start from the second stitch next to the decrease symbol. Begin knitting from the second stitch. Before knitting, gently tighten this loop to prevent noticeable holes. There's no special pattern here. We'll purl all stitches. Now, row 2 is complete. Continue to row 3. Refer to the chart. Knit all stitches. I've finished knitting. Continue to row 4. Here we decrease 2 stitches at the beginning, in the same way as row 1. Start with 1 slip stitch. Knit 1 purl stitch. Decrease 1 stitch. Continue with 1 purl stitch. Decrease 1 stitch. Gently tighten the loops. Then knit all purl stitches, and complete row 5. Now, I finished row 5. Continue to row 6. Decrease 1 stitch at the beginning of this row. Use the same method as decreasing the first stitch in row 1. Once completed, knit all purl stitches. For the remaining rows 7 and 9, knit all knit stitches. Row 8 is identical to row 6. Decrease 1 stitch at the beginning. Row 10 doesn't require decreasing. Simply knit purl stitches normally. Now, I've completed these 10 rows. There should be 6 stitches remaining at the end. This section is marked as place on hold, meaning we need to temporarily secure these loops. We can use scrap yarn to temporarily secure them. Unless specified otherwise, yarn tails should be trimmed to about 15 centimeters. Pay attention to prevent loops from slipping. The left shoulder is now complete. Next, knit the right shoulder. Before starting to crochet, we need to first decrease 9 stitches in the middle. You can separate them with stitch markers. Pick up the new yarn. Make a slip knot with the yarn. Slightly tighten the loop. First knit 2 knit stitches. Then decrease 1 stitch. Knit 1 more knit stitch. Decrease 1 stitch. Unless otherwise specified, on the right side, bind off while knitting the both sides together. Continue decreasing the remaining stitches. Similarly, pay attention when finishing the last loop. The stitch you're working on is the first stitch to the left of this bind off symbol. Refer to the chart for the corresponding stitch pattern. Here we continue knitting knit stitches, bind off. Once completed, start from the second stitch and finish the row. Then, on the wrong side, purl the entire second row. Now I've finished the second row. Continue to work row 3. Decrease 3 stitches at the beginning. First knit 1 slip stitch and 1 knit stitch. Decrease 1 stitch. Continue to bind off with knit stitches. Now, 3 stitches have been decreased. Continue to finish row 3 and complete row 4. Now I've finished row 4. Decrease 2 stitches at the beginning of row 5. Use the same decrease method as the first 2 stitches of row 3. For subsequent rows 7 and 9, decrease 1 stitch at the beginning. Use the same decrease method as the first stitch of row 3. I'll continue to finish the remaining part of the right shoulder. Now I've completed the right shoulder. There should be 6 stitches left here. And temporarily secure these 6 stitches. So, this neckline decrease method is now complete. So the front piece is now complete. Up to this point, the back body is fully completed.